Well, in our last two classes, we gave the historical foundations of historical relevance of the Upanishads. So we know now what is the place that the Upanishads occupy in the spiritual development of India. So now I'll take you to a little closer to the contents of the Upanishads. And here too, I'm going to read out some passages from two articles that I have taken from the Bengali writings of Sri Aurobindo. This is an article titled The Upanishads. Everyone says that the Veda is the basis of the Hindu Dharma. But very few know the real form and the fundamental truth of that basis. Often, seated among the topmost branches, we remain lost in ecstasy over the taste of one or more of the savory and transient fruits, never caring to find out anything about the roots. I mean, you can see in one sentence it tells us how ignorant we are of the Vedas. I mean, even Indians hardly know about it, and maybe a few verses we know here and there, and we have some sutras and some poems. We often quote them, and that's it. We don't know anything more than that. So you're saying, true, we have heard that the Veda is divided into two sections, the one part dealing with action and the other dealing with knowledge. They are called Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda, that's not important, but the two parts to the Vedas, one dealing with action, the other one is knowledge. And of course, in my next class, I propose to give you a bit the structure of the Vedas. You see, we have a few ideas about what it is and what are the verses, what are these things. The thing is, we are really skimming on the surface of the Vedas, a kind of a hearsay knowledge. Either we have Pandits who are really deep into it and they are so much wedded to the Vedas and the Upanishads that they don't see the modern knowledge, or we, the modern ones, don't look at that. So our education is pretty lopsided. And what do we know? There is a Karma Kanda and a Jnana Kanda, that means one of them having suktas which are really concentrating on the action, and the other one concentrating on knowledge. And mostly it is the knowledge aspect which is taken up by the Brahmins. And the Karma Kanda, the activities or the action, is taken up by the pujas and the rituals and all that. And that's what I mentioned there, that in the beginning, once knowledge went into the background, because not many could understand the philosophy and the deep philosophy. So people took to the pujas. They called the Karma Kanda, the what to do, what is to be done. So apart from that, we don't have too much of knowledge of these things. We may have read the commentaries on the Rig Veda by Max Muller or its Bengali translation by Ramesh Dutt, But we have no acquaintance of the Rig Veda itself. I was telling you in my next class I would like to give you a kind of the structure of these Vedas, because normally we say Vedas means what? What does it mean? Is there one book or two books or several books? Who are the authors? We just use the word Vedas. Some of us maybe go to the next level saying it's Rig Veda, nothing more. So I'll give you a kind of a diagram to show you that it's not so, there is not a book of knowledge just mentioned like that. There's been a tremendous scientific treatise that what are these books, why are they there, why are there the four Vedas, and what is the significance of the four Vedas. And then it's very interesting to see how Upanishads form a part of the Vedas. They are the end part, that's why they are called the Vedanta, the end of the Vedas. So it is like that, a diagram I will show you next time. Maybe midweek I'll send some of you who have emails, addresses with me. The Upanishads form part of the whole Vedic ritual. So they are not separate books and separate books of knowledge. There is a section which is dedicated to the Upanishads. What they are, the structural part of it I'll bring you. But here you see, the Rig Veda has been made popular by Max Muller. And you know what it means. I will come to what Aurobindo himself would tell us. We have received the knowledge from Max Muller and Ramesh Datta that the rishis of the Rig Veda worshipped external objects and beings. The incantations and hymns to the sun, the moon, the winds, and the fire constituted the ancient Hindu dharma's eternal fundamental knowledge about the human. By assuming their view to be true and thus belittling the Veda, the rishis and the Hindu dharma, we consider ourselves highly learned and enlightened. You see what has become the state of Indians, that we read the translation by Max Muller, who had hardly any understanding of this Upanishads or the Vedas, because he says, you see, that these Indians were worshipping nothing but this external things, sun, moon, wind, fire. He could not understand the real spiritual depth. He went by the externalities and then he called us almost barbarians. That is, Vedic people were barbarians, they had nothing better to do. So Aurobindo says, unfortunately, it is this translation, which has been again translated into Bengali by Ramesh Datta, that has become popular in India, and we are taking that to be the last word. So imagine what a poverty of our own Vedas. So I can imagine why Aurobindo had to take it up in order to perhaps bring in some light to the Indians mostly, because it's really pathetic situation. Even you go to our postgraduate students in any university, go to Pondicherry and ask them, do you know what are the Vedas? Hardly anyone would raise his finger. If one finger, how many Vedas? There is a Rig Veda. The ignorance is horrible. So Aurobindo has taken a lot of trouble to really reinterpret the Vedas, bring it into modern times, and you will see why he did that even with the Upanishads. He himself will tell us at the end of that article. We make no effort to find out what is truly there in the authentic Veda, or why the sages and great souls like Shankaracharya and others reversed these eternal invocations and hymns as the complete and infallible knowledge. So we have one unfortunate situation that we follow Max Muller, but then there are the other Pandits, as I told you, Pandits of the Upanishads or the Vedas. Whom do they follow? Shankaracharya. And here Aurobindo tells us, few people are acquainted with even the Upanishads. When we speak of the Upanishads, we are reminded of the monism of Shankaracharya, the qualified dualism of Ramanuja, the dualism of Madhva, and similar philosophical expositions. We do not even dream of studying the Upanishads in the original, of finding out their true significance, or asking ourselves how 6 schools of contradictory philosophies could have grown from the same root, or whether any hidden meaning surpassing those 6 philosophies could be obtained from this treasure house of knowledge. For 1,000 years we have accepted the meaning given by Shankara. The commentary of Shankara has become our Veda, our Upanishad. You see, this has been again very unfortunate situation in India. In modern times, Macmillan distorted the whole meaning, and even in ancient times, Shankara was there, the greatest authentic interpretation of the Vedas and the Upanishads. But again, that was a twist. So Sri Aurobindo would really clarify the whole thing. So he also distorted the whole Upanishads and the Vedas to suit his own experience. So Sri Aurobindo is really telling us sadly that we have never had the opportunity to understand the Vedas and the Upanishads in the proper depth, in the proper vision. And he would tell us, so you see, for 1,000 years we followed Shankara, and that has become our Veda and Upanishad. So you ask all the professors of philosophy in the universities, everyone would stand by Shankara. That again tells us, you see, what a Herculean task Sri Aurobindo has done to go against a current of 1,000 years and more in India. So that is one of the major reasons why Sri Aurobindo is not accepted in the philosophy sections or among the Pandits. Because imagine a country being swayed for 1,000 years by one single thinker, Shankaracharya, and here stands one single thinker again called Sri Aurobindo, who dares to go against him. I would use the word dare because commonly nobody would dare challenge Shankaracharya. There was somebody called Ramanuja, as we have seen here, somebody called Madhva, immediately after Shankara, maybe 100-200 years later, but their influence has been much less. Philosophically they are strong, but as an influence on the society, it is Shankara who has swayed the philosophies of the country. So Sri Aurobindo is not easily accepted. I was there in Kaladi in Shankaracharya's birthplace in Kerala. The university itself is called by Sri Shankaracharya University. So there they don't like or agree or bring in Sri Aurobindo because they know Sri Aurobindo is against Shankaracharya. It is a rare case that people like me from Sri Aurobindo ashram and this, they are called because we have friends in the head of the department. Otherwise, normally Aurobindonians are not very much welcome in these holds of Shankaracharya. This Madras University itself is a stronghold of Shankara's philosophy. So you see, in India there are these strong pockets of philosophy. And so Sri Aurobindo for the past so many years has not been invited into the universities. It is only now, because of some central government policies, that there are a few Sri Aurobindo chairs here and there, and slowly Sri Aurobindo is trickling into the university corridors. Otherwise, it is very difficult. So he is telling us, Shankara has become our Veda and Upanishads. Why should we take the trouble of studying the Upanishads in the original? Even when we do so, if ever we come across any commentary which contradicts Shankara, we immediately reject it as false. Yet not only the knowledge gained by Shankara, but the spiritual knowledge or truth which has been acquired in the past or will be in the present and the future has been concealed in these profound and significant shlokas by the Aryan Rishis and the great yogis. What are the Upanishads? Now you see, we have got a third idea. So, are going on the wrong track because of Shankara and Max Muller. And then we have seen the Vedas themselves were wrongly interpreted, Upanishads again twisted. But what exactly are they? In gist, he would say, what are the Upanishads? They are the treasure house of the deepest eternal knowledge without beginning or end, which is the root and foundation of the eternal Dharma. We find the same knowledge in the suktas of the four Vedas, but covered over with metaphors which gave an exoteric meaning to the hymns like that of the descriptive image of the ideal man. This is the suktas of the four Vedas. Yeah, I'll tell you in the next class what are these suktas and what are the different parts, what is Upanishads, I'll keep it for the next class. The Upanishads unveil for us the supreme knowledge, the naked limbs of the real man. The poets of the Rig Veda, the Rishis, express spiritual knowledge in divinely inspired words and rhythms. The Rishis of the Upanishads had direct vision of the true form of that knowledge and expressed it in a few profound words. Not only monism, but all the philosophic thoughts. Now, monism is directly related to Shankaracharya. Now, see this sentence, not only monism, but all the philosophical thoughts and doctrines that have come into being in Europe and Asia, rationalism, realism, nihilism, the Darwinian theory of evolution, the positivism of Kant, the philosophy of Hegel, Kant, Spinoza, Schopenhauer, utilitarianism, hedonism, all were seen and expressed by the Rishis endowed with a direct vision. So last time when I mentioned, I think I did not exaggerate. You see, till the latest hedonism, even what you call the materialism, all these are part of the Upanishadic vision which they had out of the direct vision. So this is so important to see. The impact of the Upanishads has been universal. From ages immemorial. All the Socratic, Plato and all that you are saying, even rationalism, what we call the present modern rationalism, positivism, everything, even our great Kant and Spinoza and Schopenhauer, all are branches of the same Upanishads. But what has been elsewhere partially glimpsed, proclaimed as the integral truth, in spite of its being only a fragment of the truth, and given a distorted description with a mixture of truth and falsehood, has been recorded in its fullness and right perspective in a pure and unmistakable manner. Therefore, we should endeavor to find the true deep meaning of the Upanishads without being bound by the exposition of Shankara or anyone else. The word Upanishad means, the word etymologically it is different. You have the word upa, ni and shad. This shad is sitting, upa is near, ni is down. So sitting down near your guru, the rishi, the teacher. So anything that we really discuss closely, I thought of calling this an Upanishad this class, but then you should all be sitting down, not on the chairs. It was very strictly mentioned that the Acharya, the teacher, is on a higher platform. In those days we didn't have tables and chairs, but he had a higher pedestal. The student, like we see in Shantiniketan, that was taken from the ideals of the Upanishads. A Shantiniketan presents typically a kind of an Upanishadic scenario where the teacher, the Acharya, the Guru is seated on the high and the students are always squatting on the ground. So that is sitting down, literally sitting down on the floor. And this has become a tradition that we never sit on the same platform, on the same level as our Gurus. And there was a wonderful example I have seen in my own life with Champaklalji. Sometimes we used to come to Hyderabad, and once we had arranged a seminar. It was a public seminar in a public hall in college, and we had placed Mothers and Sri Aurobindo's photographs on a pedestal like that, and right in front, like we do normally in all the seminars, we had put a row of chairs, and one of the chairs was given to Champak Bhai. The moment he saw the Mother Sri Aurobindo's photograph, he left the chair, he went and sat on the floor. He said, I cannot be sitting on the same level as that of Sri Aurobinda Maharaj. And it is so nice that we saw in Bangkok also the same tradition. The students would never stand and speak to you, because his head or her head should not be higher than mine. Upanishad was sitting down near the Acharya. There is a lot of different etymological meanings, because what do you do sitting near Acharya? Are you just gossiping, chatting, joking? It could be anything. But here Sri Aurobindo gives a beautiful meaning. He says the word Upanishad means to enter into a secret place. The rishis did not obtain the knowledge mentioned in the Upanishads by force of argument, extensive learning, or from the flow of inspiration, but earned by yoga the right of entry into the secrecy of the mind, where hangs the key to the integral knowledge, penetrated into the hidden chamber, took down the key and became sovereigns of the vast realms of that infallible knowledge. You see, this is the meaning. It is the entering into the secret place of knowledge. So sitting close to each other, they would meditate, or the Acharya would utter a couple of sentences, then the student has to think over that, meditate. So it's not the question of intellectual debates or question answers and doubts. It was so sacred. You know, there's another meaning I found from the internet article which says, Shad is also to destroy. The word, Upanishad, Shad is also the word, the root is Sad, S-A-D, which means to destroy. But then in what sense is it destroy? That you don't destroy the teacher or the teacher destroying the student. It is destruction of desire by knowledge. So these Upanishads are meant to destroy. We will see in the Isha Upanishad, the first verse, they are meant to destroy your desire. Isha Upanishad tells us that in the very first stanza, first verse. So that is also another meaning that has come up, that when you are sitting close to the teacher gives you that knowledge which destroys your desire. Right? So Sri Aurobindo tells us, unless the key can be secured, it is not possible to have access to the true significance of the Upanishads. Any attempt to discover the meaning of the Upanishads by argument alone is equivalent to investigating a dense forest with a lighted candle from high treetops. Imagine what an image he uses. Direct vision is the sunlight which illumines the entire forest, making it visible to the seeker. Direct vision can be attained only by yoga. So no wonder that normal, ordinary teachers, professors cannot teach the Upanishads, because we are not having that kind of a consciousness. And even those who have attempted to translate, I have seen recently, I was looking for your class some books. There are plenty of books. I mean, in India, translators have done a lot of jobs translating the things. But when I see the Sri Aurobindo's translation and these translations, you can see such a vast difference. I mean, some people go by the word, they twist it, and even when Shankaracharya himself had done all that, I mean, Shankara, in spite of being one of the greatest philosophers and the greatest yogi in India, but still, his twisting could be, understood, accepted, permitted. But down the line that we have in the modern times, so many professors and university people, they have made a mess of the whole of Upanishad. So it's important which book you read. There's a book by Paul Deussen, a German author, who has understood nothing of the Upanishads and has become pretty popular by his book called 60 Upanishads. There are 2 volumes actually, volume 1 and 2. And an Indian, some Maharashtrian professor has translated that into English. But I'm amazed to see the difference of the quality of the translation. That's why, we are able to take up the Upanishads only because of Sri Aurobindo. Yeah, while on the subject, let me tell you, this is the volume that I'm going to follow. which is available at Shabda, and this is costing rupees 225. It's a good volume because it has, it has put together all the writings of Sri Aurobindo on the Upanishads, except the one that I am reading here. These are from Bengali writings, so as these are translations, they have not put them here. Otherwise, Sri Aurobindo's writings are different volumes, SABCL 27, SABCL 12, they are all scattered here and there. So they have been put into one volume and it's very convenient. So I will be following this book from our next class. So if anyone wants, because somebody was telling me which book are you going to follow, this is the one. And now coming to the next article from the same Bengali writings, a para or two from here. Why was it that Shankaracharya, although he has been quite a turning point in Indian history, but not only in spirituality, but in literature he brought forth the Vedas, he brought forth the Upanishads, he brought forth the Gita. Indian literary history doesn't exist before that. There have been authors, but very few and hardly well researched. So Shankara is a landmark, both literature, philosophy, influence, everything. He is one of those great landmarks of Indian history, spiritual history and literature. So everyone refers to, as we were talking about the Gita some time back, Gita is also by Shankara, Upanishads also by Shankara, Vedas also by Shankara. So there is no one else in Indian literature who can claim a great authority over the Vedas apart from Shankara. There have been other great scholars. Now, why does Sri Aurobindo oppose Shankara? Oppose not as a scholar, he has nothing to really oppose him like that. But why is it that Sri Aurobindo rejects Shankara's interpretation? Here is a page which has thrown light on that, and I would like to read it out. Synthesis of knowledge, synthesis of dharma, reconciliation and harmony of the opposites form the very soul of this Upanishad. This is the Isha Upanishad. I think in my first talk, if I remember, I said the Upanishads are the second attempts at synthesis of knowledge. So the whole of Upanishads, as he puts it here beautifully, synthesis of knowledge, reconciliation and harmony of the opposites. Well, this is the crux of the Isha Upanishads, that there is the synthesis of opposites. What is Vidya, Avidya, mortality, immortality, death, knowledge, ignorance, birth and death. So and then the one and the many. You see, where reason cannot find a synthesis, Upanishads has given us that synthesis. We'll come to that, but that's what Sri Aurobindo is telling us here, that this is the very soul of the Upanishad. In Western philosophy, there is a law called the law of contradiction, according to which opposites mutually exclude each other. Two opposite propositions cannot hold good at the same time. They cannot integrate. Two opposite qualities cannot be simultaneously true at the same place and in the same instrument. Well, we understand this law of contradiction, because a thing cannot be black and white at the same time, same place, same instant. This opposite cannot be coexisting. This is the law of contradiction. If the divine is one, then however omnipotent he might be, he cannot be many. This is one of the fundamental arguments of Shankara, that he says Brahman is one. So how can there be this universe? How can there be many? You see, he applies this law of contradiction. So that is his strongest logical argument, where he says this contradiction cannot be there. So, the infinite cannot be finite. It is impossible for the formless to assume form. If it assumes form, then it abrogates its formlessness. The formula that the Brahman is at the same time with and without attributes, which is exactly what the Upanishads also says about God, who is nirguno gune, with and without attributes, is not admitted by this logic. Well, it's easy to understand. Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, at the crux of Shankara's argument. Opposites cannot coexist at the same time, same place. So, and then here he applies it to Brahman, that if he is infinite, he cannot become these finite forms. If he is having nirguna without qualities, he cannot have the qualities. So he says, there is a clear demarcation. So for him, he says, is not possible. Either the Brahman is formless, then he cannot be this form of the universe. If the Brahman has become these forms, he loses the status of the formlessness. It's a kind of either or. You cannot be this and that. It is either or. So, for him it was very easy conclusion. If formlessness, oneness, infinity of the Brahman are true, then attributes, forms, multiplicity and finiteness of the Brahman are false. Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya. It's very simple. This is a famous logic that Brahman is true, then the world is an illusion, is a falsity. Because one of them only is true. Either the world is true or Brahman. But he says, I have realized that Brahman is the truth. So obviously the world is an illusion and a mithya, is a falsity. The Brahman is the sole reality, the world is an illusion. Such a totally ruinous deduction is the final outcome of that philosophic dictum. You see the strong words used by Sri-Aurobindo. Such a totally ruinous deduction is the final outcome of that philosophic dictum. And please see its impact on Indian society, because Shankara is supposed to have been born in 788 AD, 8th century. And you see India's political history. When did the invasions, the Mughal invasions begin? Around the same time, a century later. What does it mean? That it is this negative philosophy, that the world is an illusion, which weakened the Indian society, which took away the vitality, which took away the strength, which took away its prowess. Not everyone, there's a general wind which says, this world is a mithya, why live it? Why fight for it? Why conquer? Why defend? Why lose my life? So this kind of a negative swing that came up weakened the country, and then began the downfall of the country. So that is why Sri-Aurobindo is so hard on Shankara, because after him we had a tremendous gain of reviving Vedas, Upanishads and the Gita. However negative they were, at least they have been brought out from the forgotten caves of Indian history. But at what expense? Again, for a whole 1,000 years, India had to go through its lowest edge. Again, it got revived by some of the movements of devotion that came forth. We'll come to that. So Sri-Aurobindo says, the seer Rishi of the Upanishads at each step, seer Rishi is that of the one who wrote that, at each step tramples on that law, and in each shloka announces its invalidity. He finds in the secret heart of the opposites the place for the reconciliation and harmony of the contradiction. The oneness of the universe in motion and the immobile Purusha, enjoyment of all by renunciation of all, eternal liberation by full action, perpetual stability of the Brahman in movement, unbound and inconceivable motion in the eternal immobility, the oneness of the Brahman without attributes and the Lord of the universe with attributes, the inadequacy of knowledge alone or of ignorance alone for attaining immortality, immortality obtained by simultaneous worship of knowledge and ignorance, the supreme liberation and realization, gained not by the constant cycle of birth, not by the dissolution of birth, but by simultaneous accomplishment of birth and non-birth. These are the sublime principles loudly proclaimed by the Upanishads. I do not want to explain this nor halt at this, because this is quite the essence of the Isha Upanishad. The opposites, that Brahman can be this, can be nirguna, saguna. We could have qualities, no qualities. There could be one, there could be many. How do they synthesize? That is the crux of Upanishads. So when we come to that, we'll discuss more in detail. So you see, why Shankara is kind of opposed? He has followed the principle of law of contradiction, which is more a rationalistic method than the intuitive method of the Upanishads. So, and Shankara was a great mind, a tremendously rational mind. And this swing of the reason, I'll read out Sri Aurobindo's own sentence, is what made India tremendously powerfully logical, which was started with the Buddha. Shankara reinforces. There came in a logical mind into the Indian scholarship. Before that, it was more based on the heart level or the intuitive level or the inspirational level. But logic began very strong with Shankara. So, unfortunately, there has been a great deal of unnecessary confusion regarding the meaning of this Upanishad. Shankara is generally recognized as the most important commentator of the Isha Upanishad. But if all these conclusions are accepted, then Mayavada, the illusionism of Shankara, sinks in the bottomless ocean. The founder of Mayavada is incomparable and immensely powerful among the philosophers. You see the words? He is incomparable. Whole of Indian history for last 10,000 years has not produced a second Shankara. He is incomparable and immensely powerful among the philosophers. Just as thirsty Balaram brought to his feet the Yamuna is the river, unwilling to alter her course by dragging and pulling her with a plough, so also Shankara, finding this Upanishad destroyer of Mayavada and standing across the path towards his destination, dragged and pulled the meaning till it agreed with his own opinion. This is a brilliant analysis. We have understood that. The story is, of course, we have mythology. Balaram is a kind of a vibhuti who wanted to get water for his mother from the Yamuna river, but the river was a bit too far. He implored the river to give water to his mother, who was on the banks a little far away, because the river would not oblige an individual. So he drags part of the river to his mother and gives her the water. So that was the spiritual strength that they had. So which only tells us that he had the power to do it. And so was Shankara, very powerful yogi, a very powerful rishi, who had his own experience of this Advaita and the monism. He tackled with the Gita, he tackled with the Vedas, he tackled with other Chandogya and all other Upanishads. But Isha is one that stood on his way, because Isha Upanishad did not allow this kind of a negativism or asceticism or escapism or to call the world an illusion. But Shankara says, he destroyer of Mayavada and standing across the path, he dragged and pulled the meaning till it agreed. So there Shankara brings in his twisting. He knew that the meaning is not right. I will tell you all those things when we come to the verses. Exactly which word he could just twist it around and the meaning would tally with his own experience. But mind you, we should not be so harsh with Shankara. The word twist it around also is a bit of an exaggeration, because unfortunately or fortunately, Sanskrit does have these alternatives. You see, he has not given it a complete twist and says something, put in a new meaning which does not exist. There are 2 or 3 alternatives in the meaning. Say Vasyam, Isha, Vasyam, Idam. What are those words will tell you. So there are different alternative meaning to Vasa. Is it clothing? Is it getting enwrapped? Is it enveloping? Is it inhabitant? All these shades of meaning are there in a single word. So Shankara chose that word which suits him. So we cannot call him a cheater, cheating person. He has not cheated on us. But he has cleverly chosen a meaning which suits him, but at the same time which contradicts what Sri Aurobindo is arguing is, you can choose any meaning, it's fine, it's your choice. But be consistent with the text. You cannot mold the whole of your text to suit you. One verse, two verses, three verses you are twisted. But it says you cannot apply the same meanings of the words to the entire Upanishad, which Sri Aurobindo would enumerate later on, we'll see, telling us that Isha Upanishad has been dragged, as he puts it beautifully, dragged and pulled the meaning till it agreed with his own opinion. So that is the contradiction. So he has not done it purposely, but at the same time he has not been, as you would say, faithful to the Upanishad on the whole. One or two examples will suffice to show the miserable condition to which the Upanishads has been reduced by such treatment. Well, there are examples, but this is not the time. As I said, I will take you when the time comes. Then there is the last one passage here. Yeah, this is volume number 27, and there is a passage here. And mind you, I wanted to alert you, this volume is a good one. But to my shock and surprise, I saw that, the quotation that I wanted to read from this book, the editors have skipped almost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Almost 17 lines of this volume 27 are missing here in the same chapter. So tomorrow I am going to take it up with the archives and say, hey boss, what's happening? And these are lines which are really extremely important about Shankaracharya. Did they do that on purpose? If so, why? When Sri Aurobindo himself wrote it, why are we afraid of publishing that? And it's been already published in the centenary volumes, SABCS. So today I was wonderstruck. I said, my God, I bought a new book and I wanted to take it to the class, but the passage is missing. So this is a missing passage which I wanted to tell you. So while we are at Shankara, Sri Aurobindo tells us, that's on page 301 of this volume 27, SABCL, the error, however lofty, must be removed in order that the plain and simple truth may reveal itself. It is a system which still attracts the abstract intellectuality in me and represents to me what I may call an intervening and mediated truth which can never lose its validity. So he says, but when it seeks to govern human thought and life to perpetuate itself on the sole truth of Vedanta, I feel that it is in conflict with the old Vedanta. That means what? The Shankaracharyas, for the Isha at least does not support the Mayavada, as is indeed evident from the struggle and stress of difficulty in Shankara's own commentary, which reduces its fine thought and admirable expression to incoherence and slipshod clumsiness. You see, here Sri Aurobindo is very strong. The Shankara has done immense great work, no doubt about it. But some of these things have kind of ruined the Indian society. I don't know, in the larger interest you will say all is part of the eternal game. That's, of course, you can always say that. So he says, but lest, there are people who, I was asked this question when I was at Kaladi, Shankaracharya University. They said, Dr. Reddy, I think Sri Aurobindo doesn't like Shankaracharya. He opposes him. So there is always a rumor in the university quarters that Sri Aurobindo he's against and dislikes Shankara. I said, no. There is a difference of opinion. But as a person, Sri Aurobindo has great regard for Shankara. And here are the original lines I am reading to you. This is on page 303 of the same volume. This is volume 27. I trust I shall not be considered as wanting in reverence for the greatest of Indian philosophers. In my opinion, the greatest of all philosophers. That's the sentence. He repeats it, please remember. That for the greatest of Indian philosophers, then he puts a dash, he says, no, in my opinion, the greatest of all philosophers over the entire world. Nevertheless, the greatest have their limitations. In profundity, subtlety, and loftiness, Shankara has no equal. He is not so supreme in breadth and flexibility of understanding. His was a spirit visited with some marvelous intuitions and realization. But it would be to limit the capacities of the human soul to suppose that his intuitions exclude others equally great, or that his realizations are the only or the final word of spiritual knowledge. Shankara of the commentaries of the Upanishads, although the greatest commentaries on them that we have, is not so great as Shankara of the Bhashya on the Vedanta Sutras. In the latter, he is developing in full freedom his own philosophy. I mean, he has, as I told you, interpretation of both the Vedas, Upanishads and the Gita. So Vedas are called the Vedanta Bhashya. So he has translated in commentaries. He said there Vedas is better off, because he didn't have to twist and turn the words to suit himself, because there he could develop his own philosophy, which even those who disagree with it must recognize as one of the highest and the most marvelous intellectual achievement. In the former, he is attempting to conquer for enlist an exclusive authority of the Shruti. A commentary on the Upanishad should be a work of exegesis. Shankara's is a work of metaphysical philosophy. He does not really approach the Shruti as an exegete. His intention is not to use the philosophical mind in order to arrive at the right explanation of the old Vedanta, but to use explanation of the Vedanta in order to support the right system of philosophy. So this is the turn. So normally you should be faithful to the text and see what it tells you, but not that what this Upanishad tells must be supporting your system of philosophy. This is what is appreciated in Sri Aurobindo's essays on the Gita. Again, the same mistake was done in the Gita. Most of the translators and interpreters, they again turned or chose or selected that part of the Gita which suits their philosophy. Be it Gandhi or be it Vinoba, be it this person or that. Everyone made it into a kind of a karma yoga, or somebody made it jnana yoga, somebody made it devotional. But in Sri Aurobindo we see that neutrality. He doesn't turn it into his own yoga. He says what is there in the Gita, without pushing it, and as Shankara did, to agree with his own philosophy. So here he is saying the same thing it was done with Shankara. His main authority is therefore his own preconceived view of Vedantic truth, a standard external to the text and insofar illegitimate. Accordingly, he leaves much of the text unexplained because it does not either support or conflict with the conclusions which he is interested in establishing. He gives merely a verbal paraphrase or a conventional scholastic rendering. Where he is interested, he compels the Shruti to agree with him. So this is the great logical mind. Of course, as the single phrase tells you that he was the greatest of them. He wanted to, his great mind was so sharp that he could really turn even the Vedas and the Upanishads to suit him in his own philosophy. So this is, of course, in brief, I have read out a couple of things to establish, one or two things. Our ignorance of the Vedas and the Upanishads in India and abroad, unfortunately, they read only Max Muller and they go by a very shallow and distorted explanation of Indian spirituality. Then when it comes to the Upanishads, unfortunately, we are led by Shankaracharya, and which has brought India to a ruinous state, where he tells us, you should avoid all action. Karma is not the right way to spirituality. Only the Jnana Marga, the path of knowledge, is the right thing. And because of that, we will go into detail, but that why did he emphasize that karma, the action, is not right for spirituality? We say only vidya, jnana, knowledge is important. Aurobindo, in one of his conversations or writings, he would say, it is not really the fault of Shankaracharya to say that Jnana Marga is the right thing, Karma Marga or the path. Please try to remember this word because we will be using too many times. Karma Marga is the path of works. Because you see, in a way, when we come to this situation, to the times, we have to go by the times. Just as we thought about the Buddha, similarly with Shankaracharya. Why did Shankaracharya call this world a mithya or an illusion? Why did he say works are an illusion? Works take you further into bondage. Because of a simple historical factor which was reigning at his time. What was happening at that time? It is the karma marga, karma kanda, that means all the works of the Vedas that have been initiated in the Vedas and the Upanishads, they had gained ground. The truth of experience of spirituality was forgotten. And everyone thought we must do this puja and this ritual, go to this place and do a pranam there. So it was so much externalized that life lost the inner meaning. So just as the Buddha erased with one stroke all the question of this gods and goddesses and divine, and because again the same thing, there's too much of this ritualism. So Buddha said, no rituals, nothing, get lost. So he did it out of a historical necessity. And once he did that, the ritual, the wave of ritualism came back to India, and once again the common human beings were caught up in that ritualism. So here was Shankara, who had to repeat what the Buddha did 1,000 years back or 1,500 years back. Repeat what? You see, there he expelled the gods, the divine, the Buddha. He denounced the soul, the God, the divinity, so that you could concentrate on the work upon earth and in your own life. You see, it is so time-based. So these avatars come at a particular time to establish a particular thing. So Buddha's necessity was there in order to erase all this question of the gods and all that. Because in gods, in the Vedas, there are 33,000 gods, and people are all the time pleasing the gods with this and that. So he said, no gods. Do your work on this earth. Be a good worker. Follow the fourfold path. Do this kind of a a moral life. But now Shankara says that moral life, doing works upon this earth, became so important. Not only that gods came back, but the karma marga became so important. So once again Shankara had to again efface all this karma, saying no more karma, you concentrate on knowledge. You see, It's a wonderful symphony that's happening. It's not accidental. As I told you in my first talk, this Indian spirituality seems to have had some kind of an overseeing hand and a Godhead. At each age, a right person was brought in this country, which he could, in order to push the country forward. So Buddha was against this gods, iconoclast. Shankara, he said, karma is no good because we are all stuck in the works. He said, concentrate on the Jnana Marga. So that was necessary. And so he went to the extreme, saying that this Jnana Marga is right, Karma Marga is wrong. And now we see in Sri-Aurobindo, he says, all this error has to be once again erased. This emphasis on Jnana has to be raised. Now what does Sri-Aurobindo do? He brings in the same thing. Philosophically, if you look at that, he brings back knowledge, he brings back karma, he brings back devotion. You see, what is emphasized by the Gita? This Manmanabha Madbhakta, he said, become my disciple, my adorer, my this thing. Devotion, brought back. Shankara denounces jnana, karma, brings back karma. Buddha denounced the gods, Sri-Aurobindo brings back. Tantra announces the mother, the Shakti aspect, forgotten, he brings back. So we see in Sri-Aurobindo again one of those great minds, but a mind which is synthetic. And not only a synthetic mind which has brought in one or two, doesn't reject anything. He brings Shankara, he brings Madhva, he brings Ramakrishna, he brings Tantra. And so we have here once again a Ganges of knowledge, wherein all the tributaries from the Indian past have come into this Ganges of Sri-Aurobindo's knowledge. And now we have once again a full flood of knowledge, of Gita, of devotion, of knowledge, everything. So this is a strange movement that is, I can see it always, it comes together, becomes a synthesis, again it expands, breaks into many tributaries, once again a new avatar comes, he brings in a synthesis. So this is the kind of what Sri-Aurobindo has done. He is not really opposing Shankaracharya for the heck of it. As you have seen, I don't think anyone has given these great words that he is the greatest of Indian philosophers, in my opinion, the greatest of all philosophers. So the world has not seen another Shankara before or after. And such is the great reverence. So Sri-Aurobindo is not having anything to do personally, but a point of view of the synthesis of knowledge, yes, he has to denounce Shankaracharya, just as Shankaracharya denounced Buddha. Now Sri-Aurobindo denounces Shankara, only to re-establish the old Vedanta. And that's why he gave such a great importance to Isha. He has written so much, and he has written it so many times, it seems, from 1910 to 1914. He went on giving different drafts, different explanations. It's only when Arya started that the real explanation began of the Isha Upanishad verses. Before that, he had a long essay called The Life Divine. The Life Divine he titled Isha Upanishads as the Life Divine, because he found in the Isha Upanishads the tenets of a pure divine life. So this is the importance, and obviously it's so interesting to see that all these great people have always collaborated, have always given commentary on the Vedas, on the Upanishads, on the Gita. This has become a tradition of Indian scholars, Indian genius, because this is the real knowledge, the spiritual treasure house, as he calls it, which has been preserved from yuge, from time immemorial, from century to century, so that it is passed on to the new world. So Sri-Aurobindo, I am sure, would not have spent so much of energy on these translations and commentaries were they not useful for his own supramental world. So this is a knowledge that comes from the Vedic times and will go into the supramental age. So all these Shankaracharyas, Ramanujacharyas, they have only preserved this knowledge. Because that's what Sri-Aurobindo says. If India lives, it lives for the future of mankind, not for herself. So now I understood what the Upanishads are in their beauty, and next time I'll take one class, maybe half the class, to give you a kind of a chart of literature, because it's quite a mess if you don't get, if you just read it. I'll try to create a diagram which I'll send you on your emails, and maybe produce a couple of them here. And so I would like you to have now a full chart. What exactly are the Upanishads? Where do they stand? How many are there? What is the good thing? Then we'll take up maybe a class later the actual text. Okay? I hope you'll have patience till then. Yeah, we'll have concentration.